Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Margaret Philbrick, author of House of Honor. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry. This is a treat to be here.
I'm super excited to have you. I really loved the book, but before we really jump in and start talking about House of Honor, can you give us just the quick elevator pitch as to what people are going to find when they open up the pages?
Sure. The art heist is an actual event. It happened, the heist of a Caravaggio nativity painting in 1969 on a dark, stormy night in October, and it's never been recovered. And it's one of the top 5 unsolved art heists in the world, kind of like the Gardner Museum heist. It's just, a long time people have been wondering where the heck is this painting, including me. And that's what motivated me to write the book. And as I did the research, it really draws together threads of the Mafia, the Vatican, and powerful Italian families. And also a love interest, of course, because you always have to have a love interest. And so it's really a journey about these families and about how their lives intertwine over this masterpiece painting.
Absolutely. I did not realize that this was based on anything true. And so while I was preparing for the podcast, I was just doing a little bit and it was like, oh my gosh, it was really stolen in 1969. And it's now in, like an FBI top unsolved art crime, right? And I thought, wow, how really interesting is that? So what made you say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to write about an art heist.
Yeah, my mom was a painter, and I've always been dragged to museums my entire life. And now, fortunately, I go to them because I want to. But, growing up, understanding art and living in that milieu was just very important to her. And then when we were in Italy for our daughter's graduation from college, my youngest son took me into the chapel that the 3 Caravaggios are in. It's in San Luigi dei Francesi in Rome. And it's my first time to see them because I grew up in Chicago and the Art Institute didn't have a Caravaggio. And so I saw them and it was an art experience that happens sometimes where you are just confronted by something in a way that takes you apart and you aren't really sure why you're having that reaction. And you have to think about it. It forces you to really get in touch with your own emotions and understand what is happening for me with this particular art. And then I left that museum that day and I bought my first book on Caravaggio. And that's when I found out in reading it that that painting was taken in real life. And I just couldn't stand it. I mean, I just seen this art for the first time and one of his masterpieces is gone. So that made me ask the question, like anyone would, why is it gone and why did somebody take it? And that led to the research. That was 3 years. I did 3 years of research about the Mafia, the Vatican, Italian wealthy families and Mafia families, as well as Caravaggio, his life and his art. And once I had done all the research, then I knew I had to write the book. But I wasn't planning to write the book. I was only hoping to find the answer to my question, which was who took the painting and why did they take it? But in the research, all that stuff was so interesting.
Right? So we don't know the answer.
No, we really don't. Right? No. And that's part of the fun of the book is I think that the reader has to decide, what do I think happened to the painting? What is my take? And a lot of people who have read it said to me that it caused them to look up Caravaggio and his paintings. There's 17 in the book. But they got into wanting to know a lot more. How many did he actually create? Where can I see them? Are they in the United States? I want to see them myself. So that was one of the reasons I wrote it, was because I love his art so much and I wanted other people to get to know him. But we don't know. So the reader gets to decide what they think happened.
Right. So I was going to talk to you about research because, first of all, I'm a research junkie. So I understand that need to know. But what did you have to do for this kind of research? I mean, finding out about Mafia families in the 1960s in Italy, is that just an internet search or did you do more than that? How did you come up with all of this good information?
Yeah, in the back of the book, in the acknowledgments, instead of writing paragraph upon paragraph of all this thank you, thank you, thank you, I for my other books, and I didn't really feel motivated to do that on this book because there were so many people to thank and so many books that I had to read. So I read many books about the Mafia. I read many books about Italy. I read all of Caravaggio's biographies. Andrew Graham Dixon's biography is the current modern authoritative work, which was extremely helpful. So I thanked all those authors in the back. And that was really useful in terms of actually reading full texts to help me discern, is there enough here to write a book about this? There's so many. Of course, I printed off a ton of articles, and I have this great big stack of articles, and they're divided into folders of Caravaggio, Caravaggio's art, Vatican, Mafia. But the books is really what was the most helpful. And I was fortunate in that the National Gallery in London was having an exhibit as I was just starting the research, and it was called Caravaggio and Beyond. And I learned that the Victoria and Albert Museum Library has one of the largest collections of Caravaggio books in the entire world. So I decided I'm just going to go there. I missed my flight there, which was like a living nightmare. But I finally got there. I saw the exhibit. I saw the Caravaggios. I saw who all he influenced all the way to current day. He's been a giant influence in filmmaking today, in recent contemporary times. And so this kind of gave me a long view of him as an artist. And then I spent probably 5 days in the library of Victoria and Albert, taking notes, taking photographs of pages of the books, and just really pulling together what ended up being the scaffolding of the novel, not the full plot at all, but it really gave me a sense of the families, who's who, who's from where, what are the internal motivations, why would one of them do it, what is the structure? And then I got into reading other kinds of texts. Henry Nouwen's Return of the Prodigal Son was an extremely helpful text in thinking about lost sons and what is it that is behind their reason that they do what they do. There's all kinds of research about that today because it's kind of a thing where adult children just cancel their parents in this culture that we're living in. So I did a lot of research about that to help Orazio's character be authentic in why he treats his family like he does. So yeah, it's just like one book after another. If you're a research junkie, you know how this goes. You get like a bit of information and then you're on to the next bit of information you want to know about. And it just becomes ridiculous, right? It's like, I got to stop. And I did. Eventually I did stop. And so, yeah, it was very fun for me because of my mom, she's an impressionist painter and very into that era. So I didn't know anything about the Renaissance Mannerists, naturalists, the people who created the kind of paintings Caravaggio did. So I was able to learn so much about that particular time frame in art. And of course, I fell in love with him. I mean, he's so crazy. He's crazy. And so Orazio Bordoni's character is modeled after Caravaggio's life.
So, and I was going to ask you if Caravaggio was really that crazy. And so the answer is yes,
oh,
he
yes.
was.
It was. Yeah. Oh, yes. So much more than I even put in the book. I mean, one of the examples is that when he was on the run from the people who were probably the brothers of Ranuccio Tomassoni, and that's the person he killed in Rome over a tennis match, but it really wasn't a tennis match. It was a fight over models and territory of models being used in paintings, likely. Right. He was on the run. He was banished from Rome. And so he was under the protection of different families that he knew who really had invested in him and his art. And he decided if he went to Malta and he went to paint for the Knights of Malta on the island of Malta, he would do such a great job for them that they would grant him a pardon. And that's one of the only ways, that he could at that time get a pardon from someone who mattered enough for the Pope to let him back in. And while he was there, he painted beautiful paintings, but he got in a huge fight with one of the knights, and he injured this knight pretty significantly. And so he had to escape Malta. And that meant that in the night, he had climbed down the It's high up and there's a lot of cliff. And he scaled down the cliff to a little dinghy that was there and rowed himself over to the mainland, to Naples, in the middle of the night, just to get away from probably being killed by the other Knights of Malta. So he was extreme, wild man. Kind of, I look at him as just like a moving tornado. He's just art, color swirling in this tornado, paintings flying out of it, landing everywhere. And he's just wrecking havoc on everyone and everything where he is, So that's a pretty fun character to research, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So have you, there's so many questions that I have based on all that you've said, because the research, let's go back to the research a minute. When you said that, you could get down, I call those rabbit holes where I just start diving in and I have trouble coming back out. And so you do have to find that space to stop and say, okay, I'm going to write now. So after you were done writing,
exactly,
did you go back and do any more research once you kind of had your book? Did you then step back and go back and do any more research, or had you done enough in the beginning that you didn't have to do that?
The only thing I had to go back to, and a really big decision that had to be made for me on this book, is which of his paintings really tell the story in a way that is clear. Because once I had the book done, I really wanted to select the paintings that, if I laid them out chronologically on the floor, from the first one that Orazio sees in the museum in Milan, the basket of fruit, until the last one, which is the death of Ursula, I would want the person who read the book, like you, to be able to look at that art and literally see the story unfold in his actual art. So I had to do more research on some of the paintings, because the journal entries of Caravaggio are all true, and they're intended to be like little like foreshadowing hints in the way that Orazio's character is developing. And so I just needed to be extra sure that I was selecting the right paintings for the plot and the convergence and corollary aspects of the plot and what it was achieving. So I did have to go back and read a bit more about his paintings themselves. Yes.
Yeah. That's the way I do research too, is I research up front. I tend to do a little bit while I'm writing, like maybe something will come up and I'll just need to know a fact or something so I can grab it. And then I go back at the very end and have to kind of fill in and find those places where I just need
right.
But I don't want to
totally.
stop.
Yeah, totally. Yes, there was one spot where I introduced Don Giotto, and it's the big gathering of Niccolo, and he's home, and he's gotten his MBA, and it's the big family gathering at, the Mall Street Villa, and it's just a big party of men, right? And the Mafia men, and it's my introduction for you to Don Giotto, and I really imagined him as being a very excellent cook. I really thought of him as a person who loves culinary arts as well as fine art, and I wanted him to come across that way. So at that point, when I knew I wanted that, I just had that idea when I was writing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is the signature dish of Italy of Sicily? Not Italy, Sicily. And I didn't know. I had no idea. So at that moment, I had to learn about the pasta con sarde, and it's all with the saffron and the sardines and how they make the noodles and all this. It just got to be so delicious in my reading of it that I was like, okay, I've got it. I've got the dish. Now I can establish this quality of this character. Because he's quite a refined person, and I want him to come across that way from the beginning. So yes, I definitely had to fill in bits, little colorful bits like that along the way.
Right. Now, is he a real person as well?
No, the only real person in the story is Caravaggio. And I wrote his journal entries so that if you were a scholar, if you were sitting here and I were talking to a Caravaggio scholar, we'd probably have a conversation a lot about those journal entries And I wanted to make sure that they were accurate enough and true enough that someone who really knew his work would know that that person did their homework and develop that in the way. So he is the only one. I just, of course I thought of The Godfather, of course, and how incredible Marlon Brando is in that role. But the ruthlessness of his character is quite different. This Godfather, this Don is very different from that one that we know. He's much more of a refined, high class, well-bred Sicilian Don. And so I needed more, right, to imbue him with those qualities.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I loved it. So let's talk about some of the themes that are in the book. So we're talking about what is family? What is home? What is loyalty and honor? What is love? And all of those things that come in. So when you wrote the book, did you have those in mind, or did that just happen as you were writing?
I did have them in mind, the main ideas, kind of like the big arc overall, the narrative. And I got that idea from two places. One, my grandmother. I had two fantastic grandmothers, and they partially raised me. And so one of them, when she was in the Scottish home and she was quite elderly, she was still with it enough and physically able enough in her 90s to walk along the hallway and touch on the arm all the people in the big wingback chairs and lazy boys who were just crying out, I want to go home. I really want to go home. Someone take me home. And she would touch them and she would say, you're almost there. And she'd go to the next person and say, someone is coming for you. You're going to get home soon. She just became this voice of comfort for people who felt very far away from home in their dementia or whatever they were suffering from.
Right.
And I respected that so much. And that image of her doing that, it kept coming back to me. And I got a hold of this idea that Orazio really doesn't have the character within himself to get himself home. He's probably going to die at the hands of the Giotto family, and he's just being used and abused by them anyway. And so I had to craft a virtuous foil to him as the helper, as my grandmother, who would be the person to help him. And so that was a big idea that I got from just watching her do that. I think that also when I came across the Sicilian proverb, which is pretty famous, which is blood makes you related, but it's loyalty that makes you family, that also came across for me as those are distinctions I need to draw in the development of these families.
Right.
So, yeah, I had some pretty big thoughts, but yeah, certain little subplot themes, sub-themes, they emerged as I went along as well. I love Lena. A lot of people love Lena. At a book club I was at this week, someone said to me they threw the book across the room because of Lena. And I won't go into all the details, but
right.
She is the lighthearted, fun character who's just silly and mischievous and doesn't care what her father thinks and doesn't have all the baggage that all these male characters have. She's the fun character, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I knew I needed someone who would bring levity and lightness to the dynamics that these sons were going through. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and because this story does kind of have that Godfather-ish kind of feel to it, which can be very dark and heavy. And so to be able to have a little bit of the light and, the more playful love between the characters and those kinds of things, you get to see that. And she is kind of almost whimsical, just like, I've run away from daddy. He doesn't really know where I am. And I'm just off doing me. I'm modeling naked and, I'm just doing me. Right.
Yeah. Right. You got it. That's exactly what she's doing. Yeah, I know. I love that about her. And in that one scene where she gets the fava bean from the market and she sticks it in Orazio's back pocket, I had written that as she stuck it in the front pocket. and he didn't know. And it was like super awkward when girls were walking towards them and laughing. And so I thought that was hilarious because that's something she would do. But the editor of the book was like, that's just way too racy. Like, no. So they made me change it. It had to move to the back pocket. So yeah, she's just one of those fun. Yeah, I had to move to the back. She's one of those fun loving characters that's just doing things like that, you know? And yeah, she's a very, you're right, a winsome, whimsical kind of personality.
Well, and like you said, what's good about a character like that is it does, otherwise the book could have gotten very dark, very heavy. And instead you gave us a way to kind of back out and see things from a whole different perspective, which was just really lovely. So it was well done.
It's cool that you picked up on that. I want to make one more comment about that because it's really neat you picked that up. And a lot of people don't. And so what I also am doing there is taking that very well-known quality of Caravaggio's art, which is the contrast of the light and the darkness. That's what he's known for, is the chiaroscuro. And so because this is like the statement of his art that was totally breakthrough in terms of using actual models and using mirrors and lighting to highlight their bare feet that were super dirty on the soles. He was doing all kinds of things that no one was doing. That had to be an aspect of the book. And I love that the people who were artists, as well as you, picked that up. Because, you know, you're trying to integrate him as a character, so to speak, but really as a model for your protagonist. But yet also his art is such a big part of the book that I have to have that dichotomy between the darkness and the light going on in the plot.
See, and
so
what's
it's
crazy
cool, Terry,
is
that you got that.
I saw that, but I didn't recognize that was something that I was supposed to have picked up. So I didn't know the why behind it, which that excites me. That's one of the reasons I love doing podcasting, is when I get to talk to the author, I get to learn things that I wouldn't know any other way. When someone is reading your book, they walk away. Yeah, when they walk away, what do you want them to get out of it? What do you hope that they walk away with? Other than a great story, which they're going to get, what else do you want them to walk away with?
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. I have it's like a three-pronged purpose in actually that answer. One is that people would be piqued to actually go in a museum and stand in front of art and be aware, like consciously aware of how is this affecting me? You know, am I moved by this? If I am, what's happening for me? How am I feeling when I see this? What do I like? What do I not like? You know, and kind of revisit live museum culture. Because so much imagery is done through online now. And I feel sad about that because life in art is live. And so I would want people to go in and do that. And then I would also hope that they would seek out Caravaggio, like I mentioned before. And even people who have read the versions that don't have the art, because those are the cheaper priced versions, they end up going and looking online at the paintings and trying to figure out oh my gosh, you know, here's the Madonna Loreto. I got to look this up and see this. So checking out Caravaggio's art and seeing it, that would be a big one. And then the final one, I think the final takeaway hopefully would be that, you know, they would think about their own story and their own relationships. And how am I in my life living as a blood relative versus as a family member who is truly loyal? And what are those differences in my life? And, you know, can I do a better job? Am I doing a good job? Am I failing? You know, where am I on the spectrum of blood versus loyalty? And relationships, right at the end of our lives, that's all we've got. I mean, who are the people who are going to come and touch my arm when I'm sitting in that, you know, retirement home and telling me I'm almost home? I mean, that's, you know, that was my grandmother. I mean, she was a relational builder. She was incredibly gifted at it. And so I feel like having that sense of where am I, you know, on the spectrum of blood and loyalty, and is there a way I could do better, or am I killing it and doing great? You know, having that kind of reflection coming out of the book, I think would be awesome. That's asking a lot of people. I get that, but why not? You know, why not?
Yeah, no, I think that as an author, we're allowed to ask a lot of people, and whether they take us up on it or not, that's on them, but we can put it out there into the world for them. So what
Love that. Next? Thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah. So what is next for
Yeah,
you?
but I love
I
that.
I'm thinking,
Yeah, that's a good
like my
question.
mind immediately went to, well, there's a lot of other FBI art crimes unsolved. Like, is she going to jump into one of those, or are you going to go into something different? I'm just really curious what's next for you.
Yeah, my first novel was a classical music based love story, and it's about a boy who's a piano prodigy, and he falls madly in love with his piano teacher, who's about 50. And she gets early onset dementia, and it is all about music, classical music. He's going to the Tchaikovsky piano competition, and it's all about music. And that just came out as an audiobook with embedded music. The music is actually embedded into the text. So that brings the reader the music. And I love bringing the reader an augment to the story. So that happened for that. And then this one, it's the fine art. And our daughter, so I dedicated the first book to our oldest son, Caleb, because he's an excellent pianist. Then I dedicated this book to our youngest son, Nathaniel, because he took me in to see those paintings for the first time. And then our daughter just retired from dance. She's a professional dancer. She turned 30, and in dance land, that's like, it's it for
That's
you.
right.
Um,
Right.
So I have to do a book about dance. I really want to. It's not that I have to. I mean, I really do want to, because the dance world is in itself so fascinating. And I think because of my mom and because ballet started in France, and we have all of the beautiful, music of Debussy and Ravel and The Little Dancer by Degas and Toulouse-Lautrec. We have all these people who fit that French dance milieu. I probably will write that. I'll probably do that as my next novel.
Fantastic. I'm excited to hear about that. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this book conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a copy of House of Honor. So find the post, tell me something that you liked or loved about this podcast, and you will be in the drawing. Margaret, someone wants to reach out to you and talk to you about this book, your first book, what you've got coming up, about art in general, because they were so moved. How do they do that?
Yeah, my website is where everything is. I write a lot of poetry. I write across many genre. I just like doing that. It's just fun for me. So the website is the place where all things happen. I also have another website, which is whostolethepainting.com. And that's kind of a fun place to have actual art conversations. But those would be my main locations and the easiest to find me.
All right. So, guys, all of that will be in the show notes. So you'll be able to find the websites and the social media and everything in order to reach out to Margaret. And Margaret, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. It has been a wonderful time, and I truly enjoyed your book.
Oh, thank you so much for reading it. I think, honestly, Terry, these are always the best podcasts when the host knows the book, cares enough about the author to read it. I mean, it's just such a treat for us. And I love your slant of helping people discover works that otherwise they probably won't discover. It's such a gift. So I am very grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.